Okay, this is your 240 Q&A time writing. Your proper names are West Bank Freeway, Gene Weaver, Social Security, ID, Sandy, North State, Philip, Grant, Maine, Mrs. Crane, Ann Crane, and Mr. Lawson. And just to note that during this time writing, it will change stories at the end, so don't let that mess you up. Ready? Can you explain where they are in relationship to the intersection?
There's one.
Why don't you tell me, as you approached that intersection, what was the color of the light?
Red.
Where were you situated in the line of automobiles waiting there at that red light?
I had come off the elevated freeway. I approached the red light. I guess I was about the 10th automobile and I was going to turn left.
You said that when you came off of the freeway, you intended to turn left at that light?
Yes.
How many lanes of the freeway are there heading in your direction?
4.
That includes the lane that you were in descending off of the freeway?
I'm the only turning lane. There were 3 lanes proceeding straight.
That was going to be my next question. So the only automobiles that can turn left are in the outermost left lane of the freeway at that intersection.
Correct. That's not including the people that take the legal turn that are in the lane adjacent to me.
So the other 3 lanes of the West Bank Freeway at that particular point have all been traveling on the lower section of the freeway for at least a block or 2.
Exactly.
How many cars were ahead of you that you felt were able to get into the intersection?
About 10.
Do you travel at the intersection, or do you travel in that area a lot?
Not a lot, but often.
What would happen next in terms of those people that have turned left that are, I suppose, sitting underneath the freeway? When would their signal turn green?
Not long. Within 30 seconds, I'd say, after this signal turns green, they begin turning. I'd say approximately 30-45 seconds, then their signal turns green.
Does the light that controls the left turn that you were waiting to make, does that stay green when they get the green light to continue?
Yes, it does.
We're here pursuant to the court order we had a judge issue in court the other day when you were present. Let me ask you before we get started, have you ever been deposed before or given a deposition before like this with a court reporter where a lawyer is asking you questions?
Deposed?
Yes, given a depo like this with lawyers asking you questions and a court reporter being there.
No, I haven't.
There are a few things to keep in mind. First off, if I ask a question you don't understand or I mumble, you don't audibly hear my question, feel free to interrupt me and ask me to repeat the question or rephrase it.
I will.
I'll be happy to do so. If you don't ask me to explain or rephrase or repeat the question, I will assume you heard and understood it. Also, if you can answer my questions out loud, that will be very helpful. The only other thing I will say is that you have the right to read and sign your deposition. You need to make arrangements with the court reporter if you want to exercise that right to review it and make any notes about the deposition transcript if you want to do that, or you may waive that right. That's up to you. You just tell the court reporter before you go. Do you have any questions about the deposition before we get started?
No.
Please state your full name for the record.
Gene Weaver.
Are you employed right now?
I'm unemployed. I get disability, Social Security.
Do you have a driver's license with you today?
No, I have an ID. I don't have that on me.
Do you know your state ID number?
Pardon?
Do you know your state ID number?
No, I sure don't.
Do you know your Social Security number?
No.
Are you married?
Yes.
Your wife lives with you?
Yes.
What's your wife's name?
Sandy.
On August 20th, 1994, where were you residing at that time? Were you at that North State address?
Was I living there?
Yes, at the time that this accident on August 20th, 1994 occurred.
That's when the accident happened?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, I've been living there, about 10 years.
Do you recall seeing or coming upon an accident scene around August 20 of 1994?
I can tell you what happened. I can tell you what happened that day.
Where were you on that particular day?
On Grant.
What were you doing?
Jogging.
Had you been jogging from your house on North State?
No, I was jogging from off Phillip, turning around on Grant.
You were jogging on Phillip, turned onto Grant?
Yes.
Which way did you turn off of Phillip onto Grant?
What is that? That's turning left, right?
Which direction were you heading on Grant? Can you tell me that?
East. Is that east?
As best you can tell.
Yes.
Did you see some type of automobile accident on that particular day?
I was jogging. I stopped at the corner. Okay, I stopped at the corner for the yellow light. I realized that I could not beat the yellow light, but I knew that I couldn't cross the intersection before the automobile was going north. I stopped at the corner of Grant and Main on yellow, me as jogging. I saw an automobile parked. It was parked. I'm pretty certain it was parked. Next thing I heard was a collision on the corner. That's it. I heard a bang on the corner.
After you heard that bang, did you turn and see what had precipitated the bang?
No, I didn't have to turn because the accident was to my right. I'm to my left here. The accident was to my right.
Can you describe the automobiles that were involved in the accident to us?
I'm pretty sure the car that was going that way was a truck, pickup truck. I don't know what type. And I cannot describe the automobile that was going north. I cannot describe it.
The pickup truck was traveling on what street?
The pickup truck truck was traveling on Grant.
You said you were walking on Grant.
Not walking, jogging.
You were jogging on Grant and you came to a yellow light?
Yes.
That would have been a yellow light controlling the flow of traffic on Grant?
Pardon?
Mrs. Crane, good morning. I'm going to be asking you a few questions. I would just kind of like to set a couple of ground rules. If I'm speaking, I would request that you do not interrupt me. The court reporter can only take down one person at a time. And as a courtesy to you, I'll do my best to refrain from interrupting you or your attorneys so you can give complete and full answers. Mrs. Crane, could you please state your full name?
Ann Crane.
What's your social security number?
I am sorry, but I do not remember.
You are presently married to Mr. Lawson.
Deceased, Mr. Lawson.
We'll come back to that. I'm very sorry to hear that. What's your age?
37.
Mrs. Crane. This is your first Q&A time writing at 225 words per minute. Your only proper name is Colorado. Ready? Let's say when you were approximately a half mile from where you experienced this dirt, you didn't see any substantial debris or dust or wind in the air ahead of you?
No, not any more than I had ever seen before. It was just real sudden.
Do you think if such dirt had been blowing up ahead, not right where you were, but approximately a quarter of a mile ahead, that you would have been able to see it?
Right. If it had been blowing that bad at the time, I would have seen it, yes.
How far do you think you were able to see up ahead to pick up as you were driving, let's say within a mile vicinity of this collision? How far do you think you would have been able to see ahead and pick up substantial dust or dirt blowing up ahead?
I would say at least probably a mile if it had been blowing, you know.
So it would be your testimony then that, let's say, as you were less than a quarter of a mile from where this accident occurred, immediately prior to the time this dust started up, there was no substantial dust blowing within a mile of where you were across that highway. Is that correct?
I never saw any.
Based on what you saw, you didn't see any?
Right.
Living in eastern Colorado, I assume that you have experienced quite a few wind and dust storms across highways. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that is a problem you have to be aware of in driving?
Right. If it is dry and the wind is blowing, you always have to watch out for it.
Was it dry this time of year?
It was fairly dry, yes.
Now, you indicated earlier that you considered stopping at some point after you found yourself in this blowing dirt and sand. Where were you in relationship to when the collision occurred when you considered stopping?
The wind and dirt had just hit me and it cut off visibility altogether. And right at that point, because I could not see anything, I considered it stopping. I did not because I was afraid the car behind me would hit me from the rear. So I went ahead and decided to proceed very slowly forward, easing myself toward the right shoulder, hoping I could feel it until hopefully I would come out of it as quickly as it came upon me.
What speed were you going at the time you first experienced this dust blinding your vision?
Probably around 50, I imagine. And when it hit, I slowed down to less than 10, maybe even 5 or even slower than that. I don't remember exactly, but I had almost stopped and I kind of let it roll ahead.
From the time you first got involved with this blinding dust until the time immediately prior to the accident, you went from approximately 50 miles an hour to approximately 5 miles an hour. Is that right?
Right.
Do you remember if you had your lights on?
I did have my lights on.
Do you remember if they were on high beam or low beam?
I think they were probably on low. I don't remember, but I think they were probably on low beam.
Why do you think that?
In the daytime, I usually keep them on low beam if I have headlights on.
Now, you also testified you started getting over toward the right to some extent. Is that right?
I tried to.
When you say tried to, what was the problem in getting over to the right? You couldn't see where you were going?
Right. Then I couldn't even see the end of the car. I just assumed I was working myself toward the right.
What did you do to work yourself to the right?
Turned my steering wheel slightly toward the right.
What was your intention as you were getting over to the right-hand side, going about 5 miles an hour?
I was going to go down onto the shoulder just in case somebody was coming from the other direction and couldn't see either, and, leave the road to somebody else and get down on the shoulder and continue to get through it. Or if I felt myself down onto the shoulder, if I kept up, I might have stopped.
But your intention at that time was to drive along the shoulder on the right side.
Right, until I was completely off the roadway.
Prior to the collision, were you able to see any lines, markings?
Nothing.
You couldn't see a line to your left?
I couldn't see anything, no.
Was there a line down the middle of the road at that location?
They have these dashes to mark the center of the road all along the highway, yes.
Did you come to an immediate stop when the collision occurred?
As I remember, I came to a complete immediate stop right at the point of the collision. Then I got out of my car. Is the blowing dust to see what I had run into.
Then where was your car in relationship to the car that you hit?
Probably ahead and to the left.
Your car was to your left of that car?
In relationship to the other car, my car was ahead of it and to the left.
What do you mean it was ahead of it?
Well, my car was setting in front of the other car and a little to the left.
Dead in front of it?
Yes.
What part of your car was damaged?
The left front.
The driver's side?
Yes.
Did you observe the other car?
I did, but I am just guessing. I don't know for sure. I think the left front of the other car was damaged too.
The driver's side?
Yes.
Did the other car have its lights on, or do you know?
I don't remember. I don't know.
Were the cars just right next to each other within a matter of inches?
I think they were, yes.
You stopped immediately and then you got out of your car?
Right.
And you didn't move your car then? You didn't back it up?
As far as I remember, I did not.
Did you have occasion to observe where the cars were located on the road at that point?
At that point, I didn't.
Did there come a time when you did observe where the cars were located?
When another guy took over stopping traffic for me, I then went back up and this deputy told me to move my car over to the side and park it down in the ditch out.
Okay, this is your second Q&A time, writing at 225 words per minute. Your proper names are Mr. Torres, S.T. Gunite.
Good night.
Gunite Construction, Roth Farms, Mrs. Yoder, Plaintiffs Exhibit A, Submembers 1 through 4, Mr. Cook, Plaintiffs Exhibit A1, Plaintiffs Exhibit B1 through B6, S.T. Gunite Construction, Inc., Jody Gunite, and Hal Robbins. I don't know. That one has a typo. I don't know what that is.
Good night. Where?
No, right here, construction.
I'll fix it.
Okay. Ready? Do you recall, did Mr. Torres have any questions about these billings at that time, the July billings?
I do not recall.
How did you review them with him?
I was there with the statement and the job cost ledger sheets, and as far as reviewing them, I handed them to him.
Do you recall preparing checks to individual suppliers for the month of July as submitted on the billings from ST Gunite Construction?
To individual suppliers only?
Yes.
No, they were joint checks to ST Gunite Construction and the supplier.
Why was this done in July? Was this the procedure usually followed throughout the billings during the construction?
No,
Why did you resort to this procedure only on the last billing?
I was instructed to by Mr. Torres.
Did you contact ST Gunite Construction about the July billing?
Did I contact them?
Yes.
No.
Is there any other bookkeeper for Roth Farms who reviewed these billings and cost statements in the fall of '85?
Not to my knowledge.
Would you know if there had been other bookkeepers for Roth Farms who reviewed these statements?
Yes.
Did you, on behalf of Roth, on your own or because you were instructed to at any time, request that ST Gunite Construction change the billing procedure?
No.
Were there ever any questions raised by Mr. Torres during the fall of '85 as to the adequacy of the billing procedure?
He had questions about them. I don't know whether that falls into that particular category or not.
Was there ever any question about the nature or the format of the billing as presented to Roth Farms?
No, sir.
Now, Mrs. Yoder, you have been handed or have been asked to identify plaintiffs Exhibit A with the sub-members 1 through 4, B with sub-members 1 through 6, C 1 through 7, D 1 through 7, and E 1 through 3. Is that correct?
Yes.
In each circumstance, Mr. Cook has asked you to identify these particular exhibits.
Yes.
And in each circumstance, you have identified the exhibit?
Yes.
Do you know for a fact, without comparing those particular exhibits with those contained in your files, that these are in fact the same pieces of paper that you do have in your files?
Not without comparing them.
You are making the assumption that these are in fact the same pieces of paper that you have in your files?
Yes.
And when I say the same, they are true and correct copies of what you have in your files?
Yes.
But you have not, at this point in time, made a comparison?
No.
Now, in looking at Plaintiff's Exhibit A1, Mr. Cook, during the course of his direct examination, has asked you to identify an entry in the estimate column listed as ST Gunite Construction with the corresponding entry in the labor column of $1,700. Do you recall being asked that particular question?
Yes.
And do you recall responding that you did in fact recognize that particular entry?
As salary.
Was this particular entry ever discussed by you with anybody from ST Gunite Construction Company during the month of August 1985?
No.
Was it discussed by you with somebody from ST Gunite Construction Inc. during the month of September 1985?
No, I don't believe so.
When was the first time that these particular entries were discussed with somebody from ST Kanai Construction Company?
I believe it was October of 85.
But you are certain that it was not discussed in August of 1985.
Not with myself.
And directing your attention in Plaintiff's Exhibit B1 through B6, I would again ask you whether there were any specific discussions about the labor salary pertaining to ST Kanai Construction.
Not until the fall of 85.
So there was no discussion in August 1985.
No, not with me.
Did anybody from ST Kanai Construction, Inc. during the month of August 1985 specifically point out to you that there was a labor entry here for ST Kanai Construction?
No.
Again, referring to Plaintiff's Exhibits A and B, you have testified previously in response to direct examination that there are certain entries on these two exhibits concerning items of overhead.
Yes.
Do you recall when there was a specific discussion as to the exact breakdown of the entries concerning overhead?
I believe it was in October of 85.
Was there any discussion concerning the entries for overhead on either Exhibit A or B during the month of August 1985?
No.
And what were the circumstances under which the items of overhead as entered on Exhibits A and B, what were the circumstances under which those were discussed?
Mr. Torres requested a breakdown from Jody Gunite as to how she arrived at these figures.
Did you call Jody Gunite and ask her for this breakdown?
Yes, I did.
And what did you receive?
I received this breakdown.
What are you referring to?
Well, this is the July billing as to how she,
What is the exhibit number there?
E1,
Were there breakdowns similar to that exhibit provided for the months other than July?
I believe there was. I really am not sure.
And was Plaintiff's Exhibit E1 provided at the request of yourself?
Yes.
Had anybody from ST Kanai Construction, Inc. volunteered similar information prior to your request?
No.
Referring back to Plaintiff's Exhibits A and B, did you ever discuss with Mr. Torres the specific entries on any of the labor items?
Not until he requested them in October.
Now, looking at Plaintiff's Exhibit A1, for example, do you see an entry here on what is listed as 8 through 13 for Hal Robbins in the amount of $89.50 for labor? Did you specifically discuss during the month of August that particular entry with Mr. Torres?
No.
Did you discuss any of the other labor during the month of August with Mr. Torres?
No.
Now, during the direct examination, you testified that Plaintiff's Exhibits A, B, and E had been questioned by Mr. Torres. Were you present when Mr. Torres reviewed them?
No. I provided Mr. Torres with these.
And so when you say that Mr. Torres did review these particular exhibits, that was speculation on your part?
Yes.
You did not actually see him review them?
No.
With regard to Exhibits C and D, were you specifically present when Mr. Torres reviewed these particular items?
No.
So again, when you say Mr. Torres had reviewed Exhibits C and D, it was speculation on your part. Pause or stop?
Stop.